Hello and welcome to episode 158 of The Pitch or the Hitter, the podcast by the M-SABR Dynasty League for the M-SABR Dynasty League. I am Cam,
I'm Sahil.
and boy, am I upset the last night's game didn't get rained out.
That makes two of us. It's crazy, and I think there were three matchups that were decided by that last game. And actually four because Jake and Alex could have flipped as well. So yeah, that was quite the week. There was a lot that went on, and I mean, the standings look crazy. There's a lot of injuries. I mean, this season has not gone how I think anybody has predicted.
And
Um,
we'll talk about the standings in just a bit, but yeah, it is really topsy-turvy in the top eight or so. Not at all the order we expected.
no, not at all. But I expect things to start to stabilize a bit soon. But yeah, it feels like it's still the wild, wild west there, and there's a lot of movement that can still happen. But what do we want to dive into first?
So there is a trade to talk about. Why don't we kind of get that out of the way before we get into everything else?
Yes, like the one good thing I'll be able to talk about on this podcast. I made a trade with Connor. There's actually two trades. I don't think the second one's been added to the spreadsheet, but we do need to add that. But we'll talk about the mine first. I traded Luis Matos, Tyler Black, and Orion Kerkering to Connor for Joey Ortiz. So Joey Ortiz actually spent a day on my roster last year. He had been in my farm for a while, but then I had traded him to Conor to go as part of the package to get Josh Hader last year. Um, he was someone I really didn't want to give up. I was trying to avoid trading him to Conor, but at the time, I was like, well, he's not going to help me this year. He's kind of stuck behind, um, a lot of Orioles infielders. Like, I don't really see the future for him here in Baltimore. He needs to get traded to get value. Sure enough, he gets traded to Milwaukee. Milwaukee has started to give him a lot more playing time. And in that playing time, he's been awesome. Sent you a tweet yesterday, actually, Cam. And I think if not for Yamamoto and Imanaga, being 1, 2 in some order in the NL Rookie of the Year race, like I don't know why Joey Ortiz would not be up there. So going into yesterday's game, among qualified rookies, he's second in average of 285, first in OBP 379, first in slugging 504, first in OPS 883, and his 15 extra base hits are third, with 13 of them coming this month. I think he's a player on the rise. I think he and Jordan Westburg will be a very nice third base duo for the next, several years. Um, I don't think Ortiz is necessarily like this like top elite stud, but I think he could be, a really high end third base asset. He's only 25, and third base has been a position that's been unsettled for me for a while. And I feel like I've kind of just been patching him with different veteran holes, and now to have Ortiz with Westberg there, two players I really like. I'm excited, and it gives me a little bit of flexibility to trade a bat. Matos pulled down significantly this week. I think he'd be a decent major leaguer, but I was never as high on him as maybe some of the prospect evaluators were. I actually bid against myself here. I initially did not include Tyler Black, and then without Conor responding, I was like, I think I lowballed you. I'm going to include Tyler Black, and I like Tyler Black. I think he's going to get on base at a decent clip. Milwaukee, when they called him up for the first time, batted him in the middle of the lineup against righties, sat him against the lefties. So I thought it was a good sign they were willing to put him into the middle of the lineup right away. But I am concerned he becomes a little bit more of a platoon first baseman. Milwaukee's had a tendency to do that over the last few years with their first baseman. It doesn't look like he's going to play anywhere else defensively, based on what he's been doing in the minors this year. And I don't know if the power is necessarily going to come. And I'm really deep at first with Freeman and Alonso. So I didn't think he was the best fit. And Kerkering, reliever, I like him, but he's still pretty low on that holds totem pole for them. For the Phillies, I can, stream holds elsewhere. So I think you could argue I overpaid a little bit, although a lot of people in the chat, their kind of immediate response was that it was fair. And I wouldn't push back on somebody who said I overpaid a little bit, but I really like Ortiz and I wanted to get in now because I think the trajectory is going up. And even when there was some thoughts that, oh, he's more defense first, he's kind of a light hitting guy. I always believed he could hit more. This is just one of my guys, and I wanted to go out and get him. So.
Yeah, no, I think well, first and foremost, the Brewers definitely have to be happy with feeling a little bit better about the Corbin Burnes trade with how Joey Ortiz has been. Um, he looks fantastic. It looks sustainable. I mean, the walk rate is really good. The strikeout rate is really good. The Statcast page is, if not great, very good. Um, yeah, I think Joey Ortiz is a good guy to gamble on. I am kind of realizing like, wow, your team has got a lot of young guys that aren't the most proven right now, and you're kind of riding a lot of that right now. But at the
Yeah,
same time, Joey Ortiz could be a good guy to get in close to the ground floor on. Matos, I wasn't going to be the guy to pull the trigger on him or anything like that. And he, yeah, like you said, struggled this week. Kerkering's an interesting guy, but nothing special. Tyler Black, I like Tyler Black a lot. He has struggled in his very much in his very brief stint in the majors this year. Not to say that that's going to continue to be what he is, and not to say that Joey Ortiz is going to continue to hit like this for the next 15 years, but I think you definitely did pretty well here.
yeah, and I will say to that point, I think, one thing I realized, going into the season was like, well, I want to build a sustainable winner, right? And I'm like, you kind of have to balance it. And, for example, when Jordan Westburg really broke out, I was like, hey, I think I'm comfortable enough with him that I'm willing to kind of give him a full-time shot. And that made Max Muncy expendable. Kind of the same thing here. I'm right. All right. Like, I'm going to go and try and replace some of the other older guys I have that I view as a little more expendable. I think the next guy could potentially be Arenado now with Joey Ortiz. And it's not like I'm not going to keep some of these veterans, obviously Freeman and Altuve, Semien, Yelich, they're really big parts of my team. But also, preparing for the future and kind of filling in some younger holes where I can, I think is also something I'm looking to do as well. So it's an interesting balance act, but it's always fun to get some good young talent in here. And you know me, I like them a little better when I've seen them in the majors for a bit, and then I can kind of go and strike and trade for them as opposed to them just straight getting called up. So um, I like it.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was
Uh,
that.
yeah, and then one quick thing from Connor's perspective, I think he gets a lot of interesting young talent here, and he needs a lot of young talent across the board. So to get three young assets for one young asset at the position he's in, I think makes a lot of sense.
Yep, fair enough.
Yeah, that's all I have to say about this trade. But anything else? If not, I want to talk about the other trade.
Yeah, let's talk about the other trade. I do not remember seeing there being another trade.
Yeah, so EBO traded Cal Raleigh to Connor for 2026 second round pick. My opinion of this trade changed a bit when I saw how good David Fry was at EBO picked up. He's been having an insane season. That being said, I wonder if EBO sold on Cal Raleigh a little low. I feel like he's kind of like a top 10 dynasty catcher. And I think Connor did a good job of kind of buying him for a minimal price. I mean, Raleigh's still pretty young. Um, the Bo Naylor experience or experiment, I don't think has worked out perfectly for Connor. So I think he's kind of a nice, maybe catcher to build around, especially with Salvador Perez kind of getting up there in age. So and maybe that gives Connor some flexibility to trade him. But I can't blame BBO for wanting to open up a spot to get David Fry. So
Yeah, I get it. I mean, I almost got Cal Raleigh for a third from them a couple weeks ago, so they've, been increasing that or they got a better offer than that. David Fry is good. I owned him for a couple days. Didn't hold on to him. I'm happy with Stevenson, but David Fry has been really killing it for them.
Yeah, and he hasn't really just been catching. He plays other positions as well, so that's kind of helped him stay on the field more. So that extra quantity has also helped, I think. But we'll see if he can keep this up. I haven't really done a deep dive into David Fry, admittedly, but he seems like he could be a fun one.
Yeah. And yeah, that's just another pick EBO owns. We say it every time. They're hopefully going to do something with all of these picks eventually because they, have too many.
Yeah, it kind of scares me what they could do with all those picks on the trade market, but um, here we are. Uh, that's all I have on the trades. We did calculate the roto for the first time this week. Having a Monday off for Memorial Day allowed me to wake up and do it. Would you like to go over to roto? This was really interesting.
Yeah,
Uh,
you're the one who calculated it. It's not a lot of surprises, but it's interesting and there are definitely some.
yeah. Let's start at the bottom here. We'll knock that out quickly. I mean, it's the bottom four teams in the standings are the bottom four teams in the roto. Um, Daniel and Matt are 12th, Connor's 11th, Yuki is 10th, Alex and Zach are ninth. Any comments there?
No, that's kind of how I expected it to go. Um, I maybe expected Connor to be below Daniel and Matt, but they're both kind of in a tier of their own there, either way.
Yeah, they're especially offensively, both of them have really been bad, but not that the pitching's been too much better, but yeah, not neither team has done particularly well. Um, I want to talk a lot about this eighth place team here, and that's Jake. So Jake is eighth. He's a 71 in the roto. 29 hitting roto puts him in the bottom half, right around where Alex and Zach and Yuki's roto is, a hitting roto is. And then on the pitching side, he's doing a little bit better. He is in the top half. I think he's like sixth. So it's been he's only seven roto points ahead of Alex and Zach, which is pretty astonishing to me. But I mean, we said this in the offseason, right? Jake put a lot of eggs in the Acuña and Strider baskets, and now they're both out for the year. Um,
I mean, yeah,
how are
he's
you
closer to
feeling it?
nine. He's closer to nine than he is to seven.
Yeah, which
And
is
this is with having Acuna the whole year so far.
exactly like is I know he's currently in a playoff spot. I know his schedule has been one of the relatively easier schedules so far. He did win this past week against Alex and Zach, although it was close, came down to the end. And he only has one win against a playoff team this year. That's your team back in week three. Do you think Jake falls out of the playoff hunt by the end of the year?
I think he'll remain in the mix, but I I mean it really does not feel like he's one of the top six teams currently as it stands, and it wouldn't really surprise me at all if he ended up missing the playoffs this year.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, when you lose last year's number one pitcher and number one hitter, it's hard to uh kind of rebound and uh, you know, maintain a top team. And I think Jake's seen that in conjunction with some of his other injuries. I think he's doing as good of a job as he can managing with the situation that he has. But I mean, boy, it is rough. And the schedule gets tougher here really fast. Ruthvik, Anthony, Andrew, me, EBO, and Erik are his next 6 weeks. I mean, that's brutal.
Mm.
Yeah. I'm curious what you think about Acuna now as a dynasty asset, right? Because he's had several years now where he's ended the season on the IL with pretty big injuries. He's now torn both of his ACLs, right? He was already dealing with a little bit of a knee issue in spring training, which maybe contributed to his slow start. How do you feel about him? Like, is it time to start to be a little concerned about Acuña's ability to stay on the field?
I mean, I would put him behind Kyle Tucker right now, as a dynasty asset. Um, we can start out with that. I don't know. I mean, last year feels like the outlier when it comes to the strikeout rate. Um, which kind of makes me feel like, last year will be the outlier in terms of performance. I think when he comes back healthy, he'll be still a very good player, but maybe he's more close to like what I was expecting him to be last year as opposed to like what he actually is last year.
What'd you say, like top 15 last year, I think you said?
Yeah, I thought he was like a top 15 guy, but I was shocked that he was going first overall. And granted, I was, proven very wrong in the short term, but Uh, just kind of like, yeah, he's torn both ACLs. That is gonna suck long term.
Yeah, I'm curious how it affects his ability to run moving forward. I'm also, if there is some meniscus damage there, I'm curious to see how that impacts the timeline or, how that could affect him early in the year, next year. So, yeah, I mean, I
Hmm.
wish him best of luck in recovery. He seems by all accounts like a really good dude, but nah, this
Yeah,
is,
and it seems like he's just taking it really hard too, which just sucks to see.
yeah, that's, ugh, I feel bad, but it's how it goes sometimes. But all right, we talked a lot about Jake's team. This next grouping right here, that's kind of close. In 7, 6, and 5. So 7 is Ruthvik with the 82. Andrew at 82.5 is sixth, and Anthony at 85.5 is in fourth. Or sorry, or fifth. Any surprises there? Any of those teams stand out to you?
I mean, they do definitely feel like a tier of their own. I gotta say, I'm excited to see Anthony, having the underlying numbers match the results. He's been at the top of the standings this year, and he's playing in an underlying way like the fifth best team, which is very exciting to see.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I wasn't sure if the results were actually kind of backed up by the underlying numbers, and like you said, they are. So I'm happy for him. I think it's a solid team that he has constructed. And while I still think there's room to improve, I think there's a lot that he's done really well, and I expect him to kind of keep this up. I know yesterday, I think you kind of asked, is a win over Anthony kind of like a big win? And I think, the actual numbers when you kind of look at it now actually confirm it. So, um,
Yeah,
happy to
no,
see.
absolutely.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, other than that, like, I don't think any of these really surprise me. I think you're right. This is a pretty clear tier, one, I think, from a talent perspective. And I think each of these teams kind of has some holes that need to be addressed, but there's also a lot to like about each of these teams. And I mean, two of them were in the semis last year. So, um, I fully expect them to be back in the hunt again. Um,
Hmm.
the top four teams, is given a real 2020 throwback here. You are fourth with a 95.5. I'm third, or sorry, EBO is third, 107. Erik is second, 109.5, and I am atop the Roto, 113.5. Any surprises here? Any names or any teams you would like to discuss in particular?
Um, I mean, looking there, I'm disappointed my team isn't slightly higher. Um, I uh pitching quantity gets me every time, and I feel like I've had a weirdly down hold year, which is somewhere that I can be improving. So I'm disappointed to see kind of me be in a tier of my own below the top three, as opposed to say, like in a tier with those other three teams. And then just kind of EBO. I mean, we knew they've been playing well, but they've been playing really well.
Yeah, I think this is very real what they're doing. I think the Roto really shows it. If I had guessed without looking at the numbers, I would have guessed that you and EBO were flipped. But yeah, I mean the numbers say very differently. I've been very impressed with this team, and I think they're only going to get better. And it's fun to see Zane kind of back on top here. It's kind of like when EVO stopped doing well, Jake kind of rose up, and with Jake kind of falling a bit, EVO's kind of taking their place back. Um, it's kind of how it feels, but um, it's been a lot of fun to watch. Erik's done really well. It's interesting to me to split between his hitting and pitching ratio. He is a top hitting team, but his pitching roto is not as doing as well. I think Erik has quite a few very good starting pitchers, and I know his pitching roto is kind of knocked down because um, he doesn't play for saves, but so it is a little misleading perhaps. But I think Erik's overall had a really good season. I was admittedly a little surprised to see me atop the roto, kind of given how the last 3 weeks have gone. I don't think I've played terrible over the last 3 weeks, but things just some of these bounces haven't gone my way. Um, I think I'm going to be fine in the long haul, but you know, uh, second in a hitting roto, tied for first in a pitching roto, first overall in the roto should not lead to eighth place in the standings. I know I've had one of the more difficult schedules to start out. And I know about half of my remaining games are against teams in the bottom four, will be really nice. Um, but yeah, I kind of need to get things going here. I will have already guaranteed. So I have 4 losses. That's the same number I had all of last year. Plus, I have a tie, which I didn't have last year. So I'm already guaranteed to have a worse record than last year. But there was a point last year where things weren't going as well in the first half of the season, and then I really skyrocketed in the second half of the season. I kind of found a groove, dumped some players who weren't really productive, got in some new assets. So I'm hoping it's kind of the same this year. But yeah.
Yeah, I think you'll be fine. I mean, you are in a hole, which you will have to dig yourself out of, but I think your team is going to be fine.
Exactly. I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think there's a big difference kind of looking at the roto between, say, the hole that I've dug myself in and the hole that like Jake has dug himself in. Um, but anything else you want to add about the roto, or do you want to talk about the matchups?
Yeah, where do we want to go next?
Yeah, why don't we start with your matchup with Andrew? One of several that was kind of decided by that last game. You kind of alluded to that at the beginning. You were winning going into that Cubs Cardinals game on Sunday night, correct?
That is correct. You know, um, and Andrew led most of the week, but I took the lead on Sunday. And just for some backstory here, I was visiting friends in St. Louis for the weekend. Friday's game got rained out. I was uh, going to Friday's game. I was in the stadium. It got rained out. Um, just kind of not the best weather this weekend. Sunday rolls along. There is a tornado warning, and there's just lightning, and it's raining heavy. And it seems like the game's going to get rained out. And I was kind of providing live updates of like, yeah, this game is not happening, and which was great for me because I had the lead, and Andrew had 2 batters remaining, and basically just needed them to reach base 3 times, and he would flip OBP, and if not, then I would have won. And somehow, some way, they got the game in, and Ian Happ homered twice to beat me. Not only flip on base, but also flip RBI too. Just a rough, terrible, awful, awful time.
It's how it goes sometimes. We're about to talk about another matchup that got flipped by 2 home runs by a struggling player. But yeah, tough loss for you. It looked like you had this one. You kind of made this furious comeback here, but that's just how it goes sometimes. But anyone you would like to highlight specifically in your matchup?
Yeah, so looking down Andrew's looking down Andrew's team, he had that Ian Happ performance, like you said. He got 8 RBI from Brian Reynolds. Um, he had a really solid week from Luis Rengifo. Looking at the pitching side, not a ton of standout performances of Alexis Diaz, after a rough string of outings, put together 3 really solid ones this week. I got 3 saves. If he did a little bit worse, I could have won. Matchup MVP though, very easy one is Bobby Witt Jr. 4 homers, 2 doubles, 11 RBI, still a base 2. Just really flip this matchup here in Andrew's favor.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Bobby Wood Jr. has been a huge piece for Andrew's team and has really been driving him there. And certainly, I mean, he needed all of those RBIs from him to get the win. Anything else you'd like to add, or?
No, I mean, just looking down my team, I had a decent week on the hitting side, although I my own base percentage was low. Um, Pitching wise, I had some quantity, although I just uh, the ERA and WHIP were not there. Yusei Kikuchi had a terrible start on Sunday that after a fantastic start earlier in the week, I just got blown up on Sunday to kind of kill any momentum I had. Shout out Tanner Houck, 2 quality starts, 13 innings, 1 earned run, um, 12 strikeouts. Just yeah, 2 fantastic performances here that kind of brought my team back into it and led to me taking the lead for a little bit on Sunday.
I'm waiting for you to change your team name to something Tanner Houck related after just how drunkenly excited you get about him.
I'll be moving into the city. I'll probably be attending more Red Sox games. I might have a Tanner Houck jersey in the next month or two.
Oh God. Yeah, you were. I'll give you credit. You were really pushing for him in the offseason as being someone who was going to break out, and he certainly has. So good for you there. But anything else you want to add, or do you want to dive into the next matchup?
No, let's dive in. I guess lastly, really quick, I need a second baseman just like most teams do, with Bogarts being hurt and um and maybe Jonathan India, he's kind of heating up a little bit after really struggling. I'm hoping that he can be that guy because it and Bogarts wasn't doing that well to begin with, but it's kind of a black hole in my lineup.
That reminds me. Did you talk about Edmundo Sosa or?
I did not, but I want to shout him out. I picked him
Yeah.
up on a whim on Thursday because I needed someone in my lineup, and he, went 6 for 14 in my lineup, homered, doubled twice. He could, uh, he's a third base eligible guy, which I need currently.
Did you start
Uh,
him today?
I did start him today. Did something good happen?
Yeah, he his last at bat, he tripled off Blake Snell and then scored on a wild pitch.
Well, I, wish it was a double and scoring on 2 wild pitches, but uh, either way, Edmundo Sosa might be this year's Willie Castro for me? Question mark.
Could be. I'm curious what the playing time looks like for him when Trey Turner comes back, which I don't think it's going to be too much longer before he comes back. But I mean, if he keeps hitting like this, they're going to find some playing time for him, I'm sure.
Hmm.
But yeah, I that was the other player you seemed really excited about this week. So I swear every time Edmundo Sosa did something good, it made me think of you. But um, let's move on. I think that I just alluded to the fact that there was another struggling hitter who hit 2 home runs that flipped a matchup. And that was my matchup versus EBO. So I had about as bad of a start to a hitting week as you will ever see. I think my OBP at one point on Thursday had dropped down to 203. Um, Made kind of a pretty solid offensive comeback, culminating in Sunday going into that Cubs Cardinals game. It was 6-6. And I was like, okay, I'm ahead 2 RBIs. I have Suzuki and Arenado left. He has Goldschmidt and Bellinger left. And I was like, okay, like this might be my, they can't get 2 RBIs. And sure enough, Paul Goldschmidt's first at bat, or second at bat, he hits a 2-run homer. And I'm like, you're fucking kidding me. Um, then his second at bat comes up, and I'm like, all right, if I get an RBI from Suzuki or Arenado flips it, I'll tie, fine. Second at bat, he hits another 2-run home run, and that sinks me in. Seiya Suzuki in his last at bat, if he would have hit a home run, there's two runners on. He would have given me the what would have been an epic win or epic tie. But he flew out to end the game, which also affected directly another one of our matchups, which we'll get to in a second. Um, One other decision that really hurt me, and it's one of these things where you never know which decisions are going to hurt you in the end. On Monday, I cut Luis Garcia Jr., who had been struggling, and I was like, I know he's playing on Monday, but I cut Daniel Hudson. He'd been getting some saves. I really wanted to get him back on my team, and I didn't want to risk it. So I added him. He got a save on Monday. Saves was not close, but Luis Garcia Jr. had 3 RBIs on Monday. Uh, those 3 RBIs would have handed me a tie. And instead, I take a really tough loss. EBO played very well in the week, pulling their numbers back up here. It was a low OVP week for both of us. They had a 302, but 18 homers, 48 ribbies, 8 steals, 52 runs. It was pretty awesome. I also had a great offensive week, 14 doubles and 11 steals, bested them in those categories, but 46 RBIs, 11 homers, 38 runs was not nearly enough. And then we split the pitching stats. I won the rate stats and strikeouts. EVO got quality starts, saves, and holds. They tied their quality starts record with 8, 9 saves, 3 holds. I mean, just a fantastic pitching week from them. Or for both of us really, but they were the ones who kind of put up some of the stats. I kind of had a little bit of unluck with the weather and kind of knocking out some of these quality starts I was hoping for, but we'll certainly take the 2.41 ERA and 0.94 WHIP. Tough loss to a quality team. There's no way of sugarcoating it, but EBO played well. I was happy with how my team rebounded towards the end of the week, but certainly frustrating how it finished out. And
Yeah,
I'll kind of break it down from here.
yeah, certainly frustrating. Great week for EBO. We said they're doing well in the Roto, and they really are. Um, Good hitting week for Matt Chapman, who homered 3 times. Not really any standout hitters outside of that. Like they had a good week from last year's Edmundo Sosa, Willie Castro, who had a stolen base, had 5 runs. Uh, Decent week for Gunner. Pitching side was kind of a mixture of great starts and bad starts, like some great Brian Wu work, but some really bad Casey Mize. Um, they had one really great start from Yamamoto and one not so great start from Yamamoto. Matchup MVP is a pitcher, and it's a guy that we talked about this week, Ryan Weathers, who we had maybe before this week pointed out as, hey, maybe he's this year's Suarez line. Um, as in Jose Suarez, a guy that teams will convince themselves is a long-term guy, young, pitching well, and then end up cutting him or trading him quickly. Ryan Weathers was kind of looking like that. He had been on 3 teams in short order, been streamed and pitching well, young, kind of post-type prospect. And I think he maybe pitched himself out of that because he had a tremendous week, 15 Ks, 2 quality starts, just 10 base runners in 13 innings, just 1 earned run. Really, really liked what I saw from him this week.
Yeah, I was certainly impressed by what he did and was certainly kind of baffled at how he was able to do it, kept up somebody's low pitch count. So I think he's a worthy MVP, and I appreciate that we're able to pick someone who's not just kind of your traditional names. I mean, I know Kyle Tucker had another good week, but like, I don't want to just pick Kyle Tucker every week. It's nice that some of these other names are picking it up, and I think it bodes well for EBO, who really did a good job of pushing the buttons. And I know this rotation looked like it could be a weak point, but they've really kind of started to piece some guys together. So good for them. They have another tough test this week, and excited to see how that goes.
Yeah,
Um,
no, absolutely. Yeah, nervous to see how that goes.
Oh yeah, that is true. It is you that they are playing against. So yeah, that's gonna be a tough one for both sides. But I have nothing else to add here, unless there's anything else you want to say.
No, I'd like to move on here. Why don't we talk about the matchup that well, there were three matchups that people were talking about in the chat. There was me freaking out about the rain. There was you and Zane going back and forth, and there was Yuki who was worrying very much about how his team would do, and he ended up tying the Drury to give them their first positive result of the season.
Yeah. The Drury, what this came down to, was they kind of were able to flip ERA there at the end. ERA and WHIP were insanely close between both of the teams. And it, it wasn't really a banner week from either team, but they played a pretty close competitive matchup here. And we talk about Yuki sometimes kind of playing down to his opponent, and I mean, it was kind of a rougher week for him, but yeah, it's certainly one he would like to have back. Uh, but he drops to 3-5-1, and for the first time all season, Daniel and Matt did not lose a matchup. They didn't win, but they're 0-8-1 now. So, uh, yeah.
Yeah, no, good for them. Yeah, pitching side, you said they got ERA to flip. Yeah, that's largely due to a good start from Clark Schmidt, who went 5 innings with one run on Sunday, had two solid 5 inning outings. They also had a good start from Severino. Um, Tyler Anderson got an 8 inning quality start. Hitting side, not a ton of standouts. Tyro Estrada reached base 7 times and scored all 7 times, so that's kind of wild. Um, he also, yeah, had a homer, but 241 on base percentage for the week is not great. Good week for Logan O'Hoppe. Good week for Ty France. Mark Vientos, I'm tempted to give it to because he had a 462 on base, a couple of homers, um, 4 runs. I I think I'll give it to Brenton Doyle though, who stole 5 bases. Had a good on base percentage, 4 runs. Not really a ton in the power department. Only one double and no homers, but and two RBIs. But I like the 4 runs. I like the 5 steals especially.
Yeah, great week from Bretton Doyle. I know that Daniel and Matt kind of put him on the block earlier in the week, and I'm curious to see if they sell him after this. But yeah, well deserved matchup MVP.
Yeah, no, you're right. Definitely not a banner week though for either team. Yuki was right there, but the hitting was just not great. Not that the hitting was great for either team. I mean, the Drury only drove in 28 runs, but Yuki, I mean, a 280, 284 on base percentage. Um, and really outside of that included a 472 week from Arise, and outside of that, it was really tough. Just yeah, not a great look for either team. Although he did barely hold on to whip at the end in order to not make this be a loss.
Yeah, that would have been disastrous for him.
Yeah.
But yeah, I got nothing else to really add about this matchup. You want to move on to the next one?
Yeah, where do you want to move on to now?
Why don't we talk about the other matchup that was kind of decided with that last game, and that was Jake versus Alex and Zach. It was a really interesting week for Jake. So he wins 7-4-1. There was a possibility that they were going to tie going into that Cubs Cardinals game, but Javier Assad did not get a quality start, and Lars Nootbaar got scratched from the lineup, which prevented Alex from potentially flipping OBP, which he was down 0.02 in. Jake hit 18 homers and had 44 RBIs this week. That's solid, but only had a 288 OBP with it. Five quality starts, 5 saves, 4 holds, 85 strikeouts is all solid, and he won 3 of those categories and tied the other. But he did it with a 581 ERA and a 144 WHIP. Whereas Alex and Zach, much better ratios, 293, 109, had five quality starts, but fell just short in saves and holds. And then had an abysmal week offensively, other than stolen bases. They had 11 there, but seven homers, 23 RBIs is pretty awful. And that's kind of how it ended up for them. They lost 4-7-1, but I mean, this one was close all week. Jake had a big offensive day on Sunday, which helped flip doubles. Um, Otherwise, I think this would have looked a lot closer. He was losing doubles most of the week. Yeah.
Yeah, no, this is another Jake pulled out the win, but outside of strikeouts, did not really look, and maybe home runs too, did not look great in any category. I mean, a 2.88 on base percentage was enough to win that, but he also had a 5.80 ERA, and a 1.44 WHIP. Just a just a tough performance. And he's kind of uh starting guys like Spencer Arrighetti, and not getting much from them. Hitting wise, he did just enough to get the win though. Ryan McMahon drove in 7 runs and homered 3 times, so that was, helpful. One guy who did play great though was Corey Seager, who homered 5 times, 7 RBI, 435 on base. He's an easy matchup MVP for Jake's team.
Jake's studs are certainly starting to play better, the Corey Seagers of the world. So I'm sure he's happy about that. But I mean, we've already talked about the Acuña injury and the trajectory of his team, so I'm not going to get into that again. But I'm sure he's happy to pick up an important win here as he heads into a tough part of his schedule.
That is true. I mean, sometimes it's just good enough to win the matchups you're supposed to.
Exactly. All right, where do we want to head next? There's two more matchups to talk about. Um,
Why don't we talk about one that was one of our matchups to watch going into this week? And that was Ruthvik beating Anthony. Both teams moved to 6-2-1. And they're tied for second with Ruthvik now having the tiebreaker.
yeah, and it's kind of crazy because I feel like among all the big matchups this week and how close some of these were to end, like this one kind of fell under the radar here. But I mean, it was a great win for Ruthvik. He pitched really well, 8 quality starts, 5 saves, 77 strikeouts, 258 ERA, and a 103 WHIP. That was enough for him to win it. With Ruthvik and Anthony splitting the offensive categories. Um, so similar offensive weeks, but Ruthvik superior. Pitching week kind of handed him an important win here, and he is 6-2-1 with some pretty big wins so far. So good for him.
Yeah, no, good for him. I agree. Uh, Listen, his team looked solid. He's what, seventh in the Roto, so he hasn't been tremendous. The hitting was mostly solid. I like the runs and RBIs totals, although the doubles, homers, and on base wasn't great. Had some good hitting weeks uh, from Christian Walker. Had a great week from Bo Bichette, who drove in 7 runs. Good week for Danny Jansen. Rough first week on the team for Julio, although he did homer twice. Pitching was where this team shined, though. I got 5 saves, 3 of which from Yohan Duran. Jose Barrios had a couple quality starts. Jeremiah Estrada, 3 2/3 innings of relief and struck out 10 batters, which is just kind of insane. Matchup MVP will be Logan Webb, though, who struck out 14 guys in 2 quality starts, only allowing 2 runs.
There you go. Yeah, Logan Webb certainly had a nice week. That all sounds great. Anything else, or do you want to move on to the next matchup? And actually, before we do, did you start Mark Leiter today?
Yeah, not good.
No, not
Well,
good.
time to text Yuki about Jeff Hoffman.
Oh God, we're at
Um,
that stage now, huh?
you know,
Hoffman has
I
that next year, but it's
yeah, Hoffman's having a nice year, but um I have been struggling when it comes to bullpen this year. It's just and holds are okay, and then once and saves were rough, and then saves became okay, and holds have just been a mess. I didn't get a single hold this past week. I don't think I got one the week before. Um, yeah.
Yeah. On the bright side right now, the Reds did just close out a 3-1 win
Yeah.
behind Lucas Sims getting the save. So good for him.
Yeah, Lucas Sims, tough start to the season, but has looked better lately.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, let's move on to the last matchup. That was Erik versus someone. Erik versus Conor. Conor kind of kept it close in the early part of the week and then kind of fell apart. I'd even hesitate to say fall apart. It just Erik has more guys. It was a pretty decent week for Conor, all things considered. 12 homers, 36 ribbies. He had 8 holds, which I think set his record. Um, and 3 saves, 3.20 ERA, 117 whip. So his bullpen's actually pitching very well, and I'm kind of curious to see if teams started to go after some of his bullpen arms. Especially now that he just added one in Kirkering, maybe that makes one of the older guys available. But I mean, Erik just dominated offensively, won all 6 categories. He did not get a hold or a save, but 8 quality starts, 77 Ks, and a 108 whip. With a 3.72 ERA, more than enough to take 3 of the 6 pitching categories and kind of run with the matchup here. Matchup he was supposed to win. And I mean, you saw it in the Roto. Erik is second in the Roto. He's only 5-3-1, but he certainly deserves to have a better record with the way that he has played. Nice win for him.
Yeah, nice win for Erik. And yeah, you're right. Conor kept it close. He pitched really well behind those 8 holds. Um, 3 for Scott Barlow, 2 for Andrew Kittredge, 2 for Cade Smith, and a couple others also. And he had a great start from Andrew Abbott, who looks awesome this year. And a great start for Lance Lynn, who looks surprisingly adequate this year. Um, Looking at Erik's team, though, one of maybe the best hitting performance he's had this year. He drove in 54 runs, stole 9 bases, 24 doubles, all around really solid hitting week. For him, I'd say that was led by Jose Ramirez, who homered 4 times, drove in 11 runs, scored 7 times. He's matchup MVP, with a shout out to Marcelo Zuna. Um, uh, Brent Rooker had a good week, and um, yeah, pitching wise too, Chris Sale. We were worried about him going into the season, and I'd say maybe I'm still worried about him remaining healthy. Uh, and that's kind of the concern, but he's been healthy so far, and he is uh he hasn't allowed more than 1 run in a start since April 19th.
It's funny because Vaughn Grisham is the one who's been hurt, and in the limited time he has played, he's looked awful. I know the Braves have not had a lot of W's lately with Strider and Acuña, but that trade was certainly a win for them.
Yeah, no, certainly.
I will say too, I'll push back. Definitely not Erik's best offensive week of this season. He did have the matchup against me where he literally set a league record and also broke another one of his offensive records. So, but certainly a good hitting week for Erik. Yeah. Anything else you'd like to say about any of these matchups, or do we want to go into matchups to watch?
Let's go into the matchups to watch. What are we? I think there's one that we are, especially me, going to be looking at this week.
Yeah, so I think there's quite a few matchups against playoff teams, which I'm really interested to see how it goes. And one thing I will say before we kind of dive into them there is I think it's in previous years it's been like, hey, we have 5 to 6 teams that are really competitive, so maybe there'd be like one matchup to watch, but then you'd have some weeks where it's kind of like, hey, all the good teams are playing bad teams. We do have 8 teams who seem pretty competitive right now. So there's been a lot of weeks of multiple really interesting matchups. Last week was one of them. This week is another one. So you I think are the headline, you in EBO. EBO 7-2, you at 6-3. Um this is kind of important here because if you lose, you fall 2 games back of them. That's going to be a little hard maybe to get past them. Although you do have the head-to-head win against them earlier in the year. I forget what the exact margin was there. Was it like 8-3-1, I think?
Something like that. Definitely important for tiebreaker purposes.
Exactly. So I'll be really curious to see how that one goes. But there's also two other matchups against kind of teams that are pretty relevant here. Ruthvik is playing Jake. I think Ruthvik maybe 6-2-1 has done slightly better than we thought he would be doing so far, especially where he's at in the Roto. But he's a prime opportunity to pick up a win here against a Jake team that is kind of reeling from that Acuña injury. Um, but and then for Jake's perspective, right? I think he's really struggling with Acuna and Strider out. And this is kind of one of his first big tests post that to see if he can kind of stay relevant in a playoff chase here. I think that the prospect of him getting a bye is over, but there's no reason to be that he still couldn't secure a playoff spot. It's curious to see how that one plays out. And then also Erik v. Andrew. Erik is 5-3-1. Andrew is 5-4, coming off a desperately needed win against you last week to avoid going from 4-0 to 4-5. Erik's just playing consistently well, probably has a couple tough luck losses that he didn't deserve. And kind of important for both of them to kind of keep pace if they want any chance of getting the bye. So three good matchups, definitely highlighted by UV Andrew. Or
Yeah,
sorry, UV EBO.
yeah, maybe EBO. Yeah, it's gonna be a tense one. Hopefully it goes the same way to the first time. But are we ready to pick these?
Yes, but before we pick them, let's go over how last week's picks went. Uh, I had no faith in myself last week, and I was correct in not having faith in myself. I picked EBO, you picked me, EBO won. I picked a Ruthvik Anthony tie. You picked Ruthvik to win. Ruthvik did win. We both picked Erik and Jake to win. I picked Yuki to win. You picked Daniel and Matt. They ended up tying. And I picked Andrew to win. You picked yourself, and Andrew won. So I won 4-0-2. You won 3-2-1. I am now 31-14-9, and you are now 31-16-7. That means I jump back ahead of you in the Roto, and I guess that means I pick first as I type the names in here. I think I will bounce back and end my first ever 3-game losing streak in this league. In fact, I've only had three other multiple game losing streaks in this league. Um, it's crazy to think.
Yeah, that is crazy.
And only one in the so two of them came last year at two-game losing streaks, and those were the only 4 games I lost last year. But before that, between 2018, 2019, 2021, and 2022, there's only one time I lost back-to-back games. So crazy to think, but I think I'm gonna bounce back this week. Um, I think I think Anthony's gonna beat Yuki. Although I think if Yuki kind of plays up to this competition like he sometimes does, could make it interesting. I think Alex and Zach are going to beat Conor. I like the way that Alex and Zach are pitching right now, but I think that could kind of carry them. The rest are kind of tough to pick. I'm going to pick Ruthvik to beat Jake. I think Ruthvik has a lot of momentum right now, and I don't want to pick against that. I think that Erik's going to beat Andrew. I think Erik has just been playing better. And then I think EBO is the hottest team in the league right now. I have no reason to pick you over them. So, yeah.
All right. Let me pick them. I think, yeah, you will beat the jury. Um, uh, I think Anthony will beat Yuki. I think Ruthvik will beat Jake. And then from there, I I will pick Erik to beat Andrew. I think Alex and Zach will beat Conor, and I think I will pick EBO to beat myself as well. I'm just off to uh, you know, I think they're off to just a really great streak. Like you said, 6 in a row. Um, the last team that beat them was me, and I think they'll get their revenge.
Interesting. Yeah, we have the exact same picks this
Oh,
week.
oh,
Doesn't often happen.
yeah. I could change one, but I think I'll leave it.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. But all right. I'm actually curious to see the last time we both picked identical. I think you have to go back to week 18 last year. We both picked identical. We both had identical pick'ems, and we were wrong on two of them. Yuki beat Erik. Or sorry, not. I went back to week 18 of there might have been one in and as a matter of fact, there was one last year, the last time we did it. No, there was a number of times, but I want to highlight this week because this is fun. There was a week in 2022 where Erik lost to Yuki and Jake lost to Alex and Zach. So
Yeah.
but we both had identical pick'ems 2 out of 3 weeks last year, week 17 and week 19. Week 19, we both won 4-2, although we both picked me to win 12-0 against you. And I did not win 12-0 against you. But we both picked the exact same winners in week 17 last year. And they both won, or we won 6-0. So,
Well,
yeah, there
well,
you
let's
go.
hope that is not the case this year because I would like us to both be wrong about my matchup.
Yeah, I actually think I might want you to beat EBO. So,
Mm,
yeah.
mm, all
It's
right.
tough admitting I want you to win a matchup.
I will take it. But yes, anything else here before we finish up this week 9 and move on to week 10?
I just hope we're talking about me winning next week. It's been like it'll be like a month between podcasts talking about me winning a matchup. They're close to it.
That would be tough.
Yeah. But all right. Until then, we will see you next time.
Yeah, see you next time.
Are you ready to move? Are you careless like a child? When you lost it, did you smile? Do you stumble like wild? Are you fading in the shadows? Is it always on the mind? When they ask, do you decline? Are you
This podcast is good.